All right, guys, we're going to get started today. Thank you for coming out to our second annual open house for our commercial plan review course. We're going to start this off with a video that kind of tells a little bit about our BD and what we do, and then we'll get into introductions and get the course started. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to the second annual Pikes Peak Regional Building Open House. We appreciate you joining us today, and we hope you walk away from this class having learned a lot. We'll kick things off with a brief overview of what PPR BD is and what we do here in the Pikes Peak region. PPR BD was started back in 1966 by an intergovernmental agreement, or IGA, between El Paso County and the city of Colorado Springs. As the Pikes Peak region grew, so did we. Today, PPR BD not only services El Paso County and Colorado Springs, but Fountain, Manitou Springs, Monument, Palmer Lake, Green Mountain Falls, and the town of Woodland Park in Teller County. So what do we do? Well, we make sure contractors have the proper licenses to do work here in the Pikes Peak region and ensure all work is done in a code-compliant manner, from plan review and permitting to new construction, remodels, and re-roofs. Our goal is to keep our citizens safe through efficient and the consistent application of adopted codes and standards. We do that by reviewing and inspecting the design, construction, quality of materials, use, and occupancy of all buildings and structures under our jurisdiction.
One of the best things about regional building and the way that regional building operates is the same codes are in place all throughout El Paso County, and the same expectations occur all throughout El Paso County. So it doesn't matter where a building is built, whether it's in the city of Colorado Springs or way out east on the plains, the same criteria applies and the same level of expectations and service is there.
The department is governed by the Regional Building Commission, a 3-member governing body consisting of 1 county commissioner designated by the El Paso County Board of County Commissioners, 1 council member designated by the Colorado Springs City Council, and 1 elected official chosen by the other member jurisdictions served by PPR BD. Probably one of the biggest misconceptions about regional building is that we are the city or we are the county and that we get tax funding. That's actually not the case. We aren't the city or the county. We are a separate entity and we don't receive 1 dime of tax money. Instead, the department is completely funded through permit, plan review, and license fees. With that said, we are proud to say that our fees have not been increased in 11 years, and we have some of the lowest building fees in the state of Colorado. In fact, when it comes to single-family homes, we have the lowest fees in the state, and compared to most of the other building departments, it's not even close.
Our low fees allow people to build and construct things at a reduced cost, and we've been able to increase efficiency throughout the years to be able to match the revenue that we receive. And the fact that we can offer outstanding service at a reduced fee over other building departments just makes us that much better, and we're very proud of that here at Regional Building.
It takes everyone in the community to keep our homes, schools, hospitals, offices, retail stores, and other buildings safe for public use. Building codes and safe construction practices help make it all possible. We hope to build on those safe practices today through education. The more informed homeowners and contractors are, the smoother the building process will go and the safer our community will be. Again, thank you for coming to our open house. We hope you enjoy this class, and we look forward to working with you on future projects.
So good afternoon and welcome. My name is Jay Edenhouse. I'm Deputy Building Official of Plans here at the Regional Building Department. The class we're going to do today is Commercial Plan Review. We tried to put this one together to help you get through some of the pitfalls that we see in plan review based on each discipline. So we've got checklists to go through. Kind of going to touch on some of the bigger ticket items, some things that may result in a review that just stops, you know. A mechanical reviewer can't go any further because he's missing some very important information. So we'll go through all those. First thing I want to do is, as most of you know already, we went through a code change last year. We are currently under the 2017 Regional Building Code. That process started in May of 2015, where a couple of us got together and locked ourselves in a room and started going through code section by section, figuring out what we thought needed to be changed and what other information that might need to be adjusted. And then it went to some public input, and we got feedback from there, put all those two together and started taking it to the jurisdictions in November of 2017. Finally got approval from all 7 of our jurisdictions, which gave us an implementation date of June 1st of last year. Because of some of the significant changes that occurred in the new code, we offered a 6-month grace period between old code and new code to where plans could be submitted under either code. And that grace period ended on December 1st of 18. So we're about, 6 months past that now. So currently, any plan that comes into us needs to be submitted to the 2017 Regional Building Code, which all references the 2015 I codes. So moving into part 1 of this, I'm going to go ahead and introduce some of the plan review staff. We have about a third of them here today. We've got Shelley Dicker. She is Senior Plans Examiner on the construction side. And Shelby Erickson, behind her, is the Senior Plans Examiner on the MEP side. And then on the far right, Justin Couturier. He is the Mechanical Plans Examiner. Dan McCulley is a Construction Plans Examiner. And Brent Johnson is our Enumeration Plans Examiner. And Tim Crippen is Plumbing Plans Examiner. So as we go through this, feel free to ask questions at any time. We're also going to have a question and answer session at the end where we can either all do it as one big group, or we can split it out into disciplines depending on how you guys want to do it. All right, so let's move into it. So we kind of went through a list of some of the typical questions we get commercially. So starting off with the first one, what codes have you adopted? We just kind of went through that, 2017 Regional Building Code and 2015 I codes. Recently updated the 2017 Electrical Code. How long does plan review take? That answer is difficult, and the only way you can answer it is it depends. It depends on the number of plans that we currently have in the bin, because we review plans in the order that they're received. So based on your plan number, that's what we're looking at. So lowest number to highest is kind of the order we go. Right now, let's see, earlier this week we were at 72 plans in one specific department, and that number's down to less than 50 now. So we do move through them pretty quick, but it just takes time to get to them. That's the time-consuming part. Who can submit project plans? Really, anybody can submit the plans, whether that be a plan runner, it can be the architect themselves, it can be the contractor. Anybody can bring plans to us, or even electronically, anybody that has an account on our website can actually do the plan submittal. But if you're the one doing the plan submittal electronically, just keep in mind you have to do all of the plan submittal. You have now become the plan runner, and you're kind of in charge of collating everything and getting it submitted to us. Do my plans need to be checked in for review? That's another one of those it depends answers. Walkthrough reviews, we do allow up to 15-minute reviews. So if it's something that can be reviewed in 15 minutes, some small scope project, then that can absolutely be walked through. There are specific project types that cannot be walked through. For instance, a change of occupancy can't be walked through. New structures typically can't be walked through. Just the amount of review that it takes for some of those is just too much, and we just can't get it done in 15 minutes. Is an architect or engineer required? Again, it depends. Per the Regional Building Code, we have design professional required, and for the most part on commercial projects, the answer is yes. However, there are exceptions, and those are listed there in that section of the Regional Building Code, and include 1- and 2-family dwellings, buildings of group R2 with no more than 4 units, but none of those units can be stacked on top of each other. They all have to be side by side. Buildings of group F2, S2, or U that neither exceeds 5,000 square feet. That's an easy one to get to, but also no more than 10 occupants in that building. That's the difficult one. Having a 5,000 square foot building with less than 10 occupants is hard to get. Additions, alterations, and repairs to those same type of buildings would not always require a design professional. And then any non-structural alterations of any nature to any building if the alterations do not affect the life safety of the building. This is a plan reviewer call. If you come in without a stamp and our reviewers determine that it is affecting life safety, it changes the path of egress, it does something to the life safety aspect of the building, then a stamp will be required. So how many sets are required and what size? This again is all listed in our regional building code. Only one set's required. We require a minimum scale of 1/8 inch and a construction document size of minimum 18 by 24. You'll see there are exceptions there, and that is typically to only single-family dwellings or equipment installs. And then what if the plans are revised? I'm sure some of you have heard the term splice, either in classes today that you've been to or just working with us in general. But if the plans are revised prior to permit, it's simply a plan change. That plan will go through review again, and you'll need to get new stamps on the plans. When the project has been permitted and you have a change to that approved plan set, now it becomes a splice. There's a process down in plan review for that. You check in the plans, or they could be walked through, but you get a specific list of the departments that need to look at that set. So that occurs after permit. So remember the term splice. So those are kind of some of the typical questions we get. We'll move into discipline by discipline at this point, and if you guys have any questions that don't get answered over the next couple slides, we can bring those up at the end. Oh, that's right, one more slide. A lot of the information that we're going to go over and some of the handouts over there, all of those handouts over there on the table, those are all available on our website. It's a great place to find all this information. All you do is go from the home page, click on handouts and forms, and then click on commercial handouts. And there's a list, and I think it's just been reorganized to where we have construction, mechanical, plumbing, and electrical in different groups. So it'll be a lot easier to find information, but there's plenty of information on there. And if you can't find it on there, feel free to call us. We're always available. So I'll pass it off to Shelley.
Good. I guess it is afternoon now, huh? Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're going to go over some common disapproval comments that you might see on your plans. Anytime that a plan is submitted to us and any part of it reads not for construction, we won't review it. We have to make sure that we're getting the final set of plans for our eyes to look at and permit off of. And anything that says not for construction, we're not considering it the final set of plans. If the scope of work is not clearly identified on the documents, we're going to have a hard time figuring out what you're trying to do. So you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're trying to permit is blatantly obvious on those plans. Another thing that's very common is that we're missing a portion of the documentation that we need to do the review. So an IECC certificate, a soils report, those kind of things. If we don't have all of the documentation, again, we can't review it because there's a piece that's missing, and that's part of our review process, is to make sure all of this stuff goes together and comes together as a complete set of plans. And with missing documentation, we can't do that. If plans are missing any information or are noticeably incomplete, it may end up in an automatic, we're going to stop the review, we're going to send it back to the finish bin or back to you if it's an electronic plan to have you fix it. If there is enough missing or there is enough that we're scratching our heads from the very beginning, we are not going to spend the time sending it to everybody and wasting your time as the submitter knowing that it's not going to get anywhere, wasting our time as the reviewers, scratching our heads wondering what's going on, so that we can all get through this as quickly as possible. That'll be sent back to you. You do have to make sure that the building information that you're giving us matches what we have on file. Since we do have plans on file going back a very long way. Residential, not so much till about 1977 or so. We didn't keep those. But we have a pretty extensive library of documentation that you can access. You can access it here in-house at our public computer. You can access it online through a subscription account, or if you're trying to access your own documents as a contractor on a project, you can do it through your contractor account. So we are going to verify that the documentation that you're giving us for the project that you're trying to do matches what we have on file for that building. It becomes really problematic when we've got a building that was started as one type of construction changed 3 times over the course of the years, and so now it doesn't work anymore. So you do want to make sure you do your due diligence, find out what you're working with, and get your plan set coinciding with that information.
How's everybody doing? Good. Time of your life? This is just like better or worse than the DMV? Better than the DMV. Ah, nice. So one of the things I want to touch on, kind of, we were talking earlier about things that you can't walk through. It kind of ties in with what Shelley was saying for complete information. So let's say you have something that you failed the first review and it says no walk. It's typically the shorthand used for that. It doesn't mean you can't come and see if you have all the information, so you don't turn it in, have it wait through the queue, by its number, and then find out that you're missing one thing, because that will prevent the review. So you can't walk through the stuff that says no walk, because we don't have time to do it, but you could always stop by and say, hey, do we have everything in here? It sounds like a waste of your time, but if you submit something and it takes us half a week to get to it, or a week to get to it, and you don't have all the information, you're back to square one, you haven't even got the review. So the walkthrough, for what it's worth, is if you're really in a hurry, come and see us. Well, there's a few in here. I'd like to make that invitation kind of, maybe come see us. Hi, Tim. The one of the things I was going to add is, one of the other things is make sure your plumbing and electrical, or your plumbing and mechanical are on separate sheets. It's one of the things that the mechanical guys run into quite a bit. Now I'm going to go back to the script. So common outside agency disapproval comments, no approved development plan, zoning, planning, and others, grading and erosion control plan. When you bring a plan in, we get these questions all the time. Can we submit 40%, 60% plan? Will that be faster? No, it's exactly the opposite. A plan that's not 100% it's a waste of everybody's time. That I understand that there's always someone screaming, there's someone concerned about the timetable, but it's a false sense of progress. Without the full plans, it's a waste of everybody's time. And air quality control permit not yet in place. That's something for health. And I think really, if I could summarize this stuff at the bottom, that's outside RBD departments. That's not us, but you have to have it. It all goes together. Any questions on that? Done?
Good afternoon. So when you submit your commercial plan, typically the first stop that it makes, whether it's paper or electronic, is the enumerations department. A lot of people say, what is enumerations? Enumerations is addressing. We make sure that the work you're doing is going on where you say it's going on. And the first thing that we typically look at is the code study form. And where a lot of people get a lot of disapprovals is that their basic information on the code study form is incomplete. Their address is wrong, or they do not have the tax schedule number or legal description. Those are all required. It helps us to verify what's in the plan set is where you're doing the work. The tax schedule number and legal description for most existing buildings and new developments can be found on the county assessor's website. The address is new and long, and it's on this handout. Basically, if you Google El Paso County Assessor, you can go to their property search page and find it. Kind of the one exception to that is if any of you come in because you're doing a traffic signal or an irrigation tap or some sort of specialty application that requires an address, retaining wall, something like that, you won't necessarily find that address on the county assessor website, and you can come in and see us and we'd be happy to track that information down for you. Otherwise, if it's an existing building, please have it on there. we typically ask for vicinity map, just, you know, a general map with a pinpoint on it showing where the work is going on. And then within the plan, we look for a site plan or a plot plan, you know, especially in areas where there's maybe multiple structures on the parcel, something like that, apartment buildings, you know, stuff like that. Highlight your area of work on the site plan. And then if you are submitting a plan, like say for apartment buildings, and there's multiple buildings included in that plan, make sure you put all the addressing on all the buildings and highlight the buildings that are affected by this plan. And that's very helpful for us to figure out because we have to list all those on the back of the label. Show the access, street names, and the north arrow, just basic information so that we can accurately make sure that the enumerations is correct on that. So if you are working in a multi-tenant building, if you're doing a core and shell building, we have a secondary addressing guide is on our website. That is one thing that we definitely look for. If you go to the RBD website and click on addressing, there's a form you can download. This is a secondary addressing guide. It's very helpful just to indicate to you what we look for, what we like to see, because our guidelines typically are the kind of secondary addressing that the fire likes to see, that the post office likes to see, to make sure that people get their mail and the emergency response can find them. And if you are working in an existing building, whether it's a first-time finish or a remodel, what we do ask for on the site plan is to show the entire building, if it's something like a strip mall, or the entire floor, if it's a multi-story office building. Show the entire floor, put all the suite numbers or unit numbers on the site plan, and highlight the area of work that you're working in. We will take that information, we will compare it to what we have in our files, and make sure that everything jives. And it'd save you a lot of time, because we unfortunately have to deny a lot of plans because it's 8-unit strip mall, and all they show on there is their one little rectangle. That doesn't tell us anything about whether what the area of work is in relation to what you're saying it is. So that's the basic thing. Just as much detail as you can put on there is really going to help you out and avoid a lot of disapprovals from us. So anybody have any questions about enumerations?
So just for the existing buildings and doing the interior remodel, you're saying just the first, if it's 2 stories, you would only ask us to do the first story with all the suite numbers and the number we're working highlighted. We don't need both?
No, just whatever floor you're working on. Like, you know, if you're working, say, downtown 90 South Cascade, which is 13 stories high, we don't need to see the floor plan for all 13 floors, just whichever one you're working on. Anybody else?
So with construction review, we've already touched on the first thing, which is the code study form. This is something that's very important, as Brent pointed out, for enumerations, and it's also really important for construction. We want to make sure that you have all that form filled out as much as you possibly can. We will definitely verify it with our records, as Shelley alluded to earlier. We want to make sure of things like the building areas, the type of construction, the occupancies. All of those are going to be very important for the project and for the history. We want to make sure that that consistency is there. Also the occupant load, and then for the most part, it's always going to require as well the architect's stamp, or some type of, I should say, Colorado licensed design professional, architect or engineer, to stamp that code study form. And that then just ties in with the drawings, and everything should match on those projects. Another
tidbit on the code study form is that doesn't mean that you aren't supposed to put the code data on the plans. You still have to give us your code analysis on the plan, and we use that code analysis and compare it to the code study form and our records. So it's not a replacement for your code data on your plan set. Another thing that we're going to be looking for on your plan set particularly comes with the means of egress, which is out of Chapter 10. How do you get in the building? How do you get out of the building? How do you get around in the building? With means of egress, any project that requires more than one exit, you will be required to do a life safety plan. That life safety plan does have to indicate all of the exits, exit signage, rated construction. We do have a handout available on our website in that same area under commercial downloads for what a life safety plan needs to look like and what all information needs to be on there. It does need to be a separate page from your floor plan. You can't combine the two. Makes it kind of difficult to get through it. With that, we want to make sure that we're meeting all of our travel distances, our separation of exits, our number of exits, our exit widths. That'll tie into corridors, corridor ratings, how much occupant load we have going through those areas. We'll also need to deal with all rated assemblies, not just corridors, but dealing with any fire walls, fire barriers, fire partitions, even smoke barriers and smoke partitions when it comes to those institutional occupancies. We are going to be looking for continuity on plans. So if you label a wall a certain type of wall, we're going to make sure that you're following the code requirement continuity for that wall. So we may be asking you for sections. We may be asking you for enlarged details showing that we're meeting that going through interstitial spaces where we need it, going up to roof or floor deck where we need it. So that information is important as well. I inadvertently answered everything. Here you go. Oh, we have a question. So,
Wait. We're recording this, which is why we have to even record the questions.
Oh, this is horrible. Okay, so on the form, it indicates on the cover sheet that you need a code study, right? However, it says see below, in which case it indicates code data. So are you looking for just a broad summary on our cover sheets, construction type, square footage, et cetera, or are you looking for a more detailed description such as what's found in the code study form that we would fill out from your website?
Yes to both of those. Yeah, it depends, really, what Jay said. If it's a small project, I'm sorry, say that again?
It's not a duplication of the life safety plan for the cover sheet.
No, it's not. Yeah, you can certainly you could include your life safety plan on the cover sheet if it's a small enough size project. You can basically consolidate all that information into one sheet if you want to. But what we don't want to have is just very limited information. We want to make sure that pretty much everything on the code study form also appears on the drawings, so that should they become separated for some reason, we can still make our way through. Not that we would review it, but the idea is that we would have all the information on the drawings as well as the code study form itself. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
So the information has to be on the plan. It doesn't necessarily have to be on your cover sheet. Most of the time when we see covers, the covers don't really tell us anything. It might give us, who all the design team is, who the contractor is, your sheet index, those kind of things. Yeah, it's very broad spectrum. And so the meat and the potatoes is going to come when we start getting into our life safety plan and that kind of stuff. So all of that code data can be on that life safety plan, not necessarily on your cover. Yes. Yeah, you can. The cover is just a cover. It's just saying, hey, this is what we're doing and who we are. But once you get into where all your life safety stuff is, that's where you're proving to us that what you're wanting to do can be done. Does that help? Okay.
And just to follow up with what Shelley was talking about with fire-rated construction, one of the things we often see is the incorrect use of terminology. We'll see people, design professionals often will identify a wall as a firewall, when in fact what they're trying to say is it's some type of a fire-rated wall. And what we want to actually see is the code terminology, which would be a fire partition, a fire barrier, a fire wall, a smoke partition, a smoke barrier, whatever it's going to be, so that we don't have to try to guess and perhaps try to read the mind of the design professional and understand what they're saying, because each of them has very different implications for how we're going to review it. So that's really critical, that if you can get that type of information correct on the drawings, then we can just do a much better review of it when that comes up. So I just wanted to tack that on to what Shelley said.
It does help the inspection staff quite a bit, because they're also looking for those same criteria for those walls. And so if we've approved a plan that says a fire wall and you intended it to be a fire partition, very different continuity requirements. So the inspector's going off the plan, wanting you to extend your corridor through the roof, and you don't need to do that. So wording matters.
And one more addendum to all of that is that we want to make sure that whenever you do have a fire-rated wall or any type of fire-rated construction, that you do supply a listed assembly of some sort for that construction. Just don't tell us what the construction is, but it does have to have a related listed assembly for it. So that's going to be either like a UL listing, a GA listing from Gypsum Association, something like that, some type of national testing organization. So moving on to accessibility. Accessibility, as you know, is a very important issue when it comes to buildings, when it comes to remodels or new buildings. There is a Chapter 11 in the IBC, is the accessibility chapter. In that chapter, in the IBC, we learn about where accessibility has to happen. Then we move to the ICC A117, which is the accessibility standard that is referenced in the IBC, and that tells us how that accessibility is going to be accomplished. So, for instance, the IBC might say all restrooms need to be accessible. And then you go to your A117, and that will tell you what all the elements of that accessible restroom need to look like. So that's how we use both of those together. It's very important, obviously, that you need to understand when accessibility is required and when it's not required. So if it's a single story or multi-story, understanding that chapter is very critical for doing a successful project.
To tack on a little bit to that, when Dan's saying that the A117.1, that's commonly referred to as the ANSI standard. We as the building department, we do not enforce ADA. So if anybody comes and starts asking us questions about ADA, we're going to say, I'm sorry, we can't answer those questions. If you have questions out of the ANSI standard, we can answer those questions. Another thing in regards to accessibility, we started, for those of you that do multifamily, so any of your R occupancies and some of your I occupancies where there's residency taking place in those facilities, we do require an actual accessibility plan at this point. Again, there is a handout on our website that spells out everything that we're going to want to see for that accessibility plan. But it is extremely helpful for our inspectors out in the field if they know exactly which units are going to be accessible and to what level of accessibility they're going to be providing. So if you're working in those multifamily residence type of occupancies, make sure that you've got that in your plan set.
And that will actually also spill over into institutional as well. So we will be looking, and you'll find it on that handout, you'll find out exactly which types of projects we actually need that accessibility plan for.
And for those of you that do townhomes, it's applicable there too. So the last thing is structural. We are going to make sure that you have your complete structural documents. The only thing that is a deferred submittal is trusses, and we also, I guess, defer awnings as well. So you can't defer a pre-engineered metal building, for instance. That does have to be part of the plan set. Give me a second to get back to you.
I was just going to ask, are sprinklers also deferred?
Okay, so the question is, are sprinklers deferred? The building department doesn't review sprinklers. Sprinkler and alarm systems are done through the fire authority, so that is a separate submittal altogether. Typically, we say yes, they are deferred because they don't have to be submitted to them at the same time your plan set is submitted to us. Okay? But anyway, we will be looking to make sure that we have all of the pieces and parts for the building, that, you know, when the plans get turned over to your contractor, they have all of the pieces and parts to build off of. We are going to be making sure that the right design criteria, the right codes, the right wind loads, snow loads, those kind of things have been used in the design. One thing that I do want to point out is our local amendments do not allow reductions in loading. So every building is going to be done at a what do they call that, a factor of 1. So the code allows you to do reductions for certain types of occupancies. The biggest thing off the top of my head is like an agricultural building. We don't allow that in this jurisdiction because we know that those buildings don't always stay for that use. So if the occupancy changes, we want to know that the building itself is structurally sound and built to the full loading requirements, and we don't have to deal with getting that building now structurally sound just because it's changed occupancy categories. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. Did I miss anything? Okay. Questions? We'll move on to mechanical.
There we go. Mechanical commercial plan review really is dependent on the scope of work that's going to be completed and the complexity of the project that you're trying to accomplish. I'm going to touch base on a few things because depending on those factors, some of it may apply, some of it may not. All plans must indicate the equipment locations, the type of equipment it's going to be, and a tag for corresponding with the schedule for that equipment so we can compare those to make sure what you're putting in place. They also need to show all the duct routing, the CFM, the sizing of the ducts, if there's any insulation going to be provided on that ductwork, and kind of indicating whether that's going to be at an outdoor location or if that duct's going to be distributed through an unconditioned space. One of the other big issues we see is when we have commercial kitchens with hoods and exhaust fans. Those hood sheets, we need the manufacturer's cut sheets, shop drawings, whatever you want to call them. We need those placed in there, and all of that information has to show us everything that you see listed there, the listing of the hood, the CFM that hood is capable of doing, the collar size, the duct sizes that are going to be attached to it, and the material of that duct, whether we're using prefabricated duct from a manufacturer or if we're going to do field fabricated 16-gauge welded steel. We also need to see the exhaust fan location and the routing of that grease duct going to it because we're going to verify the velocity and the airflow going through that. It's one of the reasons that we don't walk commercial kitchens through the walk-through counters. That time of a review is substantially longer than any of our other mechanical reviews. We also look for the gas drawings. We always need gas drawings on an M or a G page, not a P page. Gas is drawn from the IFGC, which is a mechanical code book, not the plumbing code book. All plans must be stamped by an engineer depending on the type of project. And a lot of times we'll need some section views of what you're trying to do through there, especially when we put it into rated assemblies. If we have horizontal rated assemblies and you're showing your ducts running across there, but you're not giving an indication of where those ducts are with that assembly, we don't know how you're protecting if you are making penetrations through that rated assembly for those ducts. Any penetrations through a duct, through a rated assembly, would need some type of protection. The only time you can get away from it is if the code book gives you an exception to get out of that. In those instances, we'd like to see a sheet note with a sheet tag and that tag corresponding at each individual penetration, showing us that that is your path to get through that penetration with no type of protection being shown. Fire dampers will always have to be per the UL listing and will be verified by the inspectors in the field. So that is one of the things that when you get your inspections, you will have to provide the damper installation instructions to the mechanical inspector who's checking it, and he will verify that listing. So that's one of the things that the design professionals need to do, is make sure that the dampers that they're proposing actually fit in the application that they're trying to put them into. I wanted to touch bases on splices as well. We only take splices with clouded revisions, with a delta. The clouded revision lets us know that you're not changing anything else in that plan. This is the area that you're changing. So that's the area we're going to focus our review on to make sure that everything is code compliant. I think I touched on just about all of that stuff unless anybody has any other questions. Thank you.
So how many people in here are actually involved with making electrical plans? So one? So there's a bunch of minutia that I could go into about exactly what is required, meaning the individual details. I think if you want to get with me afterwards for more in-depth, the people who are actually making plans, I'll be available. I wanted to kind of summarize what the intent of, there's a checklist, there's some things behind me that are the big things we look for. What we're looking for is we're going to look at electrical distribution system, and we're going to try to make sure, that we're not overloading any link in that chain of supply. So there's a whole bunch of real technical terminology that goes into that. It comes out of the NEC. I'm not going to bore you with all those details, but that is the intent. So let's say you're adding an AC, or you're doing a tenant finish where you're splitting up two spaces. There are, of course, code rules that apply to what you're doing for that job. But the intent is to make sure that you don't end up with a situation where, for instance, a guy opens up a new ice cream shop. The breaker for his RTU trips, we don't want that. The breaker for his space trips, we don't want that either. Or for perhaps maybe if you're into multifamily dwellings, like Chuck, maybe we don't want a panel that's in a rated wall. So when you go to actually build that, there's a way to do it, but it costs you a big pile of money. And that's pretty much the intent of all the different requirements. If you look at this stuff, the one-line diagram, that's your electrical, it's a diagrammatical illustration of the distribution system. And the reason anybody who runs plans through has failed because there's no one line. So let's say you're adding some load to a panel for an RTU or an AC. What's upstream of that? That's important because depending on that size, the investigation might have to go further. And there's the thing about panel schedules. That's a no-brainer really because you're adding, there's a panel, you're putting power into that panel. Once again, going back to the theme of overloading the distribution system. A 100 amp panel can't have 115 amps on it. The conductor will get hot, the breakers will trip, and you're back to where something is failing. And if there's one thing that we really want to make sure when we get done doing your plan review is that it works and it's safe. And also that's, it's code compliant, obviously. But inherent in the codes, the intent of the code is to make things safe. Does that make sense? Okay. And then floor plans, we have to see where everything is. Accessibility, that never goes away. I had a chance to be in a wheelchair for about a month when I was in my 20s. It's a pain if you go into places you can't get in there. And of course it's rules, it costs money, and we always talk about that angle of it, especially if you're a person, and the bottom line is you're trying to make a living. But if you've ever been there, it's real important to be able to get in and out of doors and to be able to reach stuff. It's not a joke, really. And then ICC, that's energy code, and that's wherever you stand on that, that's something we have adopted and we do it for us. Is that too brief? Any questions? Not even you, Tim? Okay, very good.
Good afternoon, I'm Tim with plumbing. Everybody knows how to do plumbing, it's easy, correct? All you gotta remember is 3 things. Runs downhill, we don't do our nails, and margaritas are at 4:30. Okay, so as far as plan review goes, we need, for the fixture counts, how many water closets, lavatories, mop sinks, drinking fountains. Yes, drinking fountains, a big issue these days. They're everywhere. They have to be there. So the fixture count is based upon the egress movement from the building code. Once they give us an occupant load, that's the load we follow. So many times it's incorrect in the code study, but the construction department corrects it, and then I base my count upon that. When you schedule your fixtures, I need the make, model numbers, and the manufacturer numbers. The reason is that when I'm doing the water pipe size analysis that you have provided on the plans, it tells me if it's correct, because some of the fixtures, if I'm doing a flushometer, it's usually a 3/4 inch or a 1 inch, and that fixture count can be high. If it's a regular toilet, it's a 1.2, that's low. So when I get a 1.2 in the field, if they want to swap out like for like on that, that's okay. But if they take out the flush valves and they take those away, it's still okay at that point. But if I have a 1.2 and they put in a flush valve, my water pipe size isn't large enough. So that creates an issue for us. Drains, waste, and vents are sized accordingly to what's going down those. The biggest thing since the 12 code that we adopted is they've got the waste stacks going now. And if it's four stories or more, we can't tie in the first 2 floors. So there's a change in there for you designers. You need to look at Chapter 10 for the waste stacks, because we're turning a lot of plans down now because nobody's caught that. As far as the water pipe size analysis, it'll be in Appendix E. It's really simple. It's not that hard. You can take and start at the meter. You'll take a meter loss depending on what size it is. If you're not sure, you can contact CSU or give me a call. I can tell you what the PSI is. You'll take a loss for the pressure valve. You'll take a loss for the elevation, which means the main underneath the slab are coming in. And then it would be the furthest distance. So then if my meter's here and my bathroom's way back there, let's call it 30 feet. And then you can look at the charts depending on your available pressure after you subtract those losses, and most of them are going to hit about 55. You can set it higher, but you can't go over 75. Otherwise, the toilets and some of the fixtures will break. That's the breaking point, is 80 PSI. So that could be a water pipe size analysis, because I get that question all the time. What is it and how does it work? Okay. Now, if we're doing a restaurant or coffee shops or some of those, we have to go through the health department and wastewater. Wastewater is concerned with what they call FOG, fats, oils, and greases. If you have any of that in your food list or anything, then you're going to put in a grease interceptor. We used to look at those, but we do not anymore. That is under the control of the wastewater. It can be as simple as a small one on the inside of about 150-pound grease sludge, but without that variance letter, my review stops, because it controls what fixtures have to go through there and what size it is. Most of those are in the ground. There are a few that can set underneath the 3-compartment sink, as if you're going into an establishment that's already set up, but then you need a grease trap. So that'll all be through wastewater. That number, her name is Carolyn Winfrey with wastewater. That'll be where you get your variance letter. So that usually holds up your project another 3 to 4 weeks if you don't have that ahead of time, just to let you know. Hot water requirements are by the health department, and that's going to be based upon your sink sizes and stuff like that. I do not have that form. They'll take care of that. That packet must also have to be paid for in advance, or you don't get through the health department. Just to give you a tip there, we have no control over that. Accessibilities has made its way into the plumbing code in the 2012, and we're looking at it as well as construction. So now we got more eyes on that, and we'll be looking for it quite a bit. Any questions? I'm always available. I do have my phone. I do not always answer my emails on the weekend, but I have occasionally, just to let you know. Thank you. I did. Well, I enjoy my job.
So that really brings to an end our presentation portion of this. From this point on, it's going to be Q&A. If you guys want to do it open forum just like this, one at a time, we can do that. Otherwise, all the reviewers are going to hang out up here for the next half hour. If you've got project-specific questions or discipline-specific questions, feel free to come on up. We'll be here. Yeah.
One thing that I do want to make sure everybody's aware that we do, and we don't have a slide for this, if you are in the middle of design of a project and you want to make sure you're on the right track, you have some code-specific questions, you can always contact us directly. If you go to our website and go down to the bottom to the employee directory, go to the plan review section, you can see all of our pretty faces and get directly to our emails there. We also do offer something called a pre-submittal consultation. This is a fee service, so you are charged for it. But there's a form on our website that you can fill out. Let us know what disciplines you want to have that pre-submittal with. You can email it directly to myself or to Jay, and we will get it set up with available staff. We do ask that you give us some times and dates that you'd like to do that, because we work around your schedule, not around ours. And basically, it's just an opportunity for you to come in and say, hey, am I on the right track? Or I'm stumped by this. This is what we've got in the plan. And we'll help you work through those issues before you do your final set to submit. It's just a service that we offer for you.
And I would say if you're stuck on like a single or 2 items on your design, you just can't get through it, but it's only for one discipline, utilize the walkthrough counter. Then that's a free service. Just bring those questions in and we can get through them there. Okay, so we're going to shut the mics off. Come on up and talk to us if you want. Otherwise, head on out and have a great weekend, everyone. Oh, there's another class after this, so I'm sure some of you are staying for that. So go stretch your legs.